got up to. We just did like the first.
Things I've got on.
First paragraph.
I go through it with a different book. But here we are.
We had
I got
questions.
up to here.
Where? Yeah. Okay, good. So
We have a few dedications as well.
are we camera flying?
Oh,
Is that gonna happen?
I'm clearly not. Okay. Testing. Testing.
Okay. So we're going to. We should restate the questions, but we had started the piece in the Alshech HaKadosh. Oh, we want to do dedications, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Today's learning of Shlomo.
The Ilui Nishamot also?
Yeah.
Okay. So we would like to dedicate the following session of our learning to Ilui Nishmat Dalia Bad Marcel, Aharon ben Shlomo, Mordechai Yisrael Tzvi ben Moshe Aaron, Shlomo Zalman ben Mordechai Yisrael Tzvi, and for a refuah shalema for Noam ben Tami, Ruvain Zissel ben Malka, Boaz. Is that the full name? Boaz?
I don't.
Okay. For refuah shalema for Boaz, and Yehuda Yona ben Sarah. Okay.
Yeah.
When's Shlomo Zalman's Yortzeit?
It's in June. June time.
Okay. Okay. So we had started. We had raised certain questions on the verse. The Adam Yada es Chavi Ishta. We talked about the birth of Cain, and the unusual phraseology that the pasuk uses to tell us what Chava was thinking in regards to Cain, and then it says that she also had Hevel, and it doesn't say anything about how she related to Hevel's birth, and then it says in the same pasuk that also Hevel, as an afterthought, it says that Hevel ended up becoming a shepherd while Cain was an agriculturalist or a green thumb farm, a cultivator of the earth, which is interesting because you would think after the last thing the pasuk reports is how God told Adam that it was a excuse. It's not meant to be a pun, but it would be essentially, well, it wouldn't be fruitless, but it would be fraught with very, very, a lot of frustration and dissatisfaction. And yet you'd think he was either very, very optimistic or very, very stubborn, or he didn't get the memo. And we have to, and then once, it's interesting because nobody ever thought of animal husbandry before this, meaning Adam had a certain relationship with the ecology of animal life, and then all of a sudden we have a shepherd. So it really raises the question: what was the relationship with man and livestock now, etc.? But people who just think of Bereshit as telling the origins of the human history, they take for granted that obviously you have to mention the punctuated moments of development of civilization, etc. But anyway, over here we question Chava's relationship to Cain, and versus a lack of recording or observation of her relationship with Hevel. So just once again, I'm gonna read the verses so it's fresh in our mind, and we'll raise the Alshech's questions. We had noted that it seems to be it's an interesting kind of it's unclear whether this occurred before being kicked out of Gan Eden or afterwards. But according to this, I believe, according to the Alshech's approach here, it's going to be this is all follows chronological order, meaning on the heels of being exiled from Eden, now Cain and Hevel are born. It would seem. Okay, so. The Ha'adam Yada es Chava Ishto, and the Adam, right? And a big question that Alshech has is why does it say Ha'adam, which usually means the species? Let it say Adam, the individual, knew Chava. Why does it say Ha'adam, right? Yada es Chava Ishto, he knew her intimately. meaning that they were together, and she became Vatahar, she conceived, Vateled, and she birthed Eskayin. Now it says Eskai. S may be superfluous. S is always going to add something, right? Vatomer. So first of all, it doesn't say she had a baby and she named him Kain. It just said she birthed Kain, and then she said Vatomer. She said Kanisi ish et Havaya, right? That she acquired a man, et over here meaning im, with God. So this is so many questions. Number one is what he was born a Kain, and then she explains why he was a Kain, or is that the reason why she named him? So why does it say his name was that first before she says this? And what does it mean that she acquired a man with God? What does any of that mean? Okay, and then the next verse is Vatosef, and she added Lalet also to give birth, as if like an afterthought, like also separate verse. Et Achiv, his brother, et Heva. We know he's his brother, right? And sometimes it says, it would say et Hevel Achiv. Why does it say his brother first and then Hevel? And it doesn't say any statement that she made to why he might be called Hevel. And it says in the same verse, Vayhi Hevel ro'etzon. Hevel was a shepherd, and V'kayin haya ovid adama, and Kayin served or toiled worked the earth. Okay.
Interesting that Hevel was first in the description.
Right. Also important thing. Okay. So we have to address the Hey by Ha'adam first, right? We had a very nice opening vart from the Alshech HaKadosh, how that there's here, I'll just read it very quickly. Hine hayro yomar vayeda Adam es, that Adam without a Hey knew Chava his wife, v'lo v'ha Adam, and the man, v'hei hayedia with the Hey of the genuine article. V'hine efsher kivnei rabbeinu zal, this is what our sages intended to address this and answer this. So Chazal they give us a tradition that on the heels of the sin, Adam separated from Chava and did tshuva, and he did not want to be with her. Now, usually we say that is the 130 years between Cain and Hevel and Shes. But over here he just says that Adam separated from Chava. Why should he birth children to purgatory? Meaning, man is in a cursed state. He's just he's bereft of hope, and he's just producing humanity that's doomed for failure. So, but afterwards, it was made known to him, a seed in the Kabbalah Torah. He knew that after the 26 generations that are alluded to in the Hodul Hashem Kitov, right, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu ultimately would give over the Torah, and there was hope for humanity. That indeed would be the salve or the balm that would help humanity go back in the opposite direction towards the Tikkun of Adam. So he decided, hey, it's worth it to invest, right? And last time we talked about this, we talked about the parallels of in the Parsha of Amram and Yocheved separating, and Miriam, etc. Okay, because she said that you're worse than Paro, because Paro only declared on the boys and only on Olam Hazeh, whereas you're declaring even on Olam Haba. You don't even bring them into being. Okay, so v'afsher yatsa lahem zal mispara shetevot shel chamesh tevot elu masha inkein im haya omer vayeda Adam. So he's saying that, you know what, the Hey here could be a tip-off to let us know that it's a reference. Maybe it told Chazal that we're alluding to the 26 Dorot that convinced Adam to be intimate with his wife. And that's why we call it Ha-Adam. Why is it going to be the 26 generations? We're going to explain in a second. But meaning the idea is that it was the 26 generations that allowed Adam to have a change of heart and be with his wife, and ultimately have
How was that linked
Hevel.
with the Hey?
Well, I'm going to explain that in a second. But also the idea here is that Ha-Adam means species. So it was out of concern for the species. I mean, this whole thing was about the species, right? So what happens is, if you look at the letters V'Adam without the Hey, Aleph is 1 and Dalet is 4, that's 5. Mem is 40, that's 45. I'm sorry, 1 second. No, we did this last time, sorry. Yeah, 1 second. Okay, 1 second. We figured this out last time. Okay. Vav is 6.
Okay. The et, we need the et is the fifth letter, is the fifth word. It was 5 words.
Is that what it was? I thought it was 5 letters in the end of Veha Adam. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Let's see. Mimis parashat shel chamesh tevot elu, ma she'en kenim hayomer vayeda Adam. It would have been a Vav and a Aleph. Vayeda Adam as opposed to Veha Adam Yada. Okay, let's do it like this. You're right. Vav from Veha Adam is 6. Yud from Yada is 16. Et is Aleph is 17. Chet from Chava is another 8. So 17 and 8 is 25. Ishto Aleph is 26.
Yeah.
Okay, Va'adam Yada Chava Ishto. If you take the first letter of each word, it's gematria, the numerical value of 26. And if it didn't say Veha Adam Yada and the man knew at Chava Ishto, it would have said Ve'adam Vayeda Adam. And it would have been a Vav and an Aleph, and you would have had a significantly less amount.
Right.
Okay, so that's what he wants to say. So, meaning the Ha'adam means the species, out of concern for the species, right? And why he was motivated out of concern for the species, meaning initially because of the species, he did not want to, but what convinced him was the 26 Dorot of the numerical value of the Rashi Tevot of these 5 words. And that's a very nice drash that the Alshech is saying, okay? Okay, v'gam amro Chava hayam yutar. It says v'adam yutar es Chava ishto. It could have just said, and he knew his wife Ishto. Why does it have to say her name? We know who she was, just like we know his other, right? The od railasim lev. It's worthwhile to note shehara'ui yomar. It should have said vatikra shemo Kayin, and she called him. She called his name Kayin. It doesn't say that. And also by Hevel. She birthed the Kayin, and his brother Hevel. It's as if each one had a name that preceded them before they were born, as if they were. This is their being, meaning the Kayin was born, and then she just explained why he was what he was. That's what it seems to be saying. And that seems pretty weird. V'im al amra kanisi, and if he was, it's putting the two together. That he was Kayin. Why? Because of her statement that she acquired a man with God. If it's because of that the verse intends, and that's why it says meaning because of that nikar Kayin, that he should be called Kayin. Hayalo lomar tchila, the verse would have said initially vatomer, and she said kaniti, she acquired a man with God, and then it would said, and she called him Kayin. So the fact that it's reversed is very problematic to understand it in the classical sense, right? Afterwards, it should say, and she called his name Kayin. And by Hevel, it doesn't even address any of these dimensions of his entree into the scene. And further, what does it even mean that she acquired a man with God? Through what does she acquire? What does it mean? And another issue. Amra, when the verse says Kanisi ish et Hashem, that I acquired a man with God, who built him muvan. It's not understood. And why? How come one was a farmer and the other a shepherd? It's a lot to take on here. Got to make sense of these sentences. Okay, so now that was all a review. Okay, so now Amna. Hine yadan mirabotenu zal ki beish veisha yesh shem yud ke. There's a Gemara in Sota that says, right, Zacha, right, that Ish are the letters Aleph Yud Shin, and Ish are the letters Aleph Shin Hey. And when they get together and everything's all nice, the Shechina Sharad Beineim, because you have the Yud from the male and the Hey from the female, and that's Yud K. But when things aren't so good, the Yud leaves the man and the Hey leaves the woman, you're left with Ish, right? That's the Gemara in Sota. Okay, so here he says that we see that the Yud from the man and the Hey from the woman is supposed to come together to represent God's name. Okay, Yud B'ish v'Hei B'isha. Kisha Zochim, when they marry, Ze Hashem B'neim, you have Ka between them. V'im lav, but if not, Notal Hu Yitbarach HaYud Me'aish. God claims the Yud from the man, V'Hei Me'aisha, and the Hey from the woman, V'Nisharu Eish Eish. Double fire. V'Hine Shem Ze Haya Ben Shnehem. V'Amro Lezos Yikara Isha Ki Me'ish Lukach Hazot. So if you look in the verse that talks about when Adam names the woman Isha because she was taken from him, that's the assignment. That's the original statement of putting the Yud in Ish, calling himself an Ish. It's the first time it says Ish. He's calling himself an Ish with the Yud, and he's calling her an Isha with the He. Okay? So in their initial creation or coming together or Chava's being, this is where this phenomenon of Yud and the He occurs, is invested in both of them. V'hine ba'avotam kvar nistaku yud v'hei me'ish v'isha. So when they had sinned, that yud and that hey was taken from them. V'lo nishar me'Hashem rak vav hey b'shem Chava. So there was actually a complete havaya, but they only were connected to the vav hey afterwards because they lost their aspect of Ish and Isha was lost, but they still had the vav hey from Chava. Interesting.
Really? I don't understand that.
Chava still retained the vav hey in her name, and therefore they had access to a vav hey in their union, even though the yud hey was from the dimension of Ish and Isha was taken away from them after the sin. Because the Ish and Isha, the Gemara says, is contingent. The yud hey is if they're zocher or not. But even though they weren't zocher to that, it seems that Chava had retained her vav hey. Okay, so v'zeu amro veha adam. That's a deeper reason why it says over here, and the man. Shehu vav hey. We're putting the vav and the hey together in the adam. We're letting you know that adam was still on the level of vav hey. They still had hayu beinehem kishiyad et chavishta. When Adam came together with Chava in this act of unity, they were able to produce the vav hey together, retain the vav hey bilvad only, without v'lo hayud hey. Ulezeh huskara Chava, and that is why Chava mentions over here ki ba ein hashtei otiot. Within her, right, she still has the vav and the hey. Al kain, therefore, vatar vatelet et Kain mipa'at hachisaron. So Kain seems to have been born and birthed from the part of their identity that was lacking. It was from the void where the yud hey was supposed to be. V'hine nolad hu utu mato. And he was born actually with his twin, his female twin, Shehim Ish v'Isha. He was intended to marry her, and that was a man and a woman that she bore. V'zeu riboy ha'et ba'amroat Kain. So if you look in the verse when it says right that she had the Kain, right, et over there means Kain came as a package together with his female counterpart, and that at least is a pure, unblemished paradigm, hopefully, right, for Isha and Isha. So Azamra, so she said, Hine, behold, Kaniti Ish. I have acquired back the level of Ish, right? She thought
you got the yud came back?
She had restored, meaning somehow she had restored into humanity now with the birth of Cain and his even though she only had the Vav Hey, the Cain, when Cain came, Cain and his female counterpart were the hopes of a restoration of a Yud and a Hey. That's what he seems to be saying here, and therefore she's saying, I've acquired now that concept, that aspect, that dimension of Ish again. Okay, Azamra hine kaniti Ish sheyesh bo Yud bein ha'alef ve'hashin v'gam etumato, and also his female twin shehi Isha ubahei v'zeo amro kaniti Ish v'gam et Hashem. So when it says I acquired an Ish with God, it doesn't mean et Hashem with Havaya. It doesn't mean really with God. It means now that I've got the Ish and his twin, I have a full set of Yud Kef there. Okay? Shehitu mato shenirmaz be'et, which is the feminine, right? That hey it was hinted in the verse of the et, which includes the female twin.
It's interesting because the compilation of the Yud Kef of hey is only attributed to her because she's the one that had the Vav Hey, and she was the one that gave birth.
So, right. So, yeah. However, he's making a big point here, and he's saying that the Vav Hey could not, even though she was the custodian of the Vav Hey in the relationship, it could only be activated through an act of union with Adam, because it has to be between two parties. So that's why
the Vav Hey part?
Yeah, even the Vav Hey. So that's why it says that it's in this act where Adam Yada is Chava Ishto, that that's so meaning ultimately so right. She did not produce, meaning she needed she didn't spawn. Yeah, of course. Right. And that's why the verse puts the Vav and the Hey in the Adam. It says Veha Adam. So meaning it's something they shared, even though it was latent in her name. She retained that. And remember, Chava was a downgrade from Chaya, because she had the Yud and became whatever. There's so much so far you can go.
The downgrade allowed her to retain half the name.
But one could say, if she wouldn't have downgraded, they would still have had the Yuds.
Yeah, you would have had the Yud.
Meaning that's part of her downgrade is just a reflection or an expression of the fact that they both lost the Ish v'Isha, they lost the Yud. Okay. Anyway, that's one approach. He's gonna flip it around. He's gonna have several different approaches. Okay, so that's So this is very nice. When it says et Hashem, it means with the et of et Kain, which was the female twin, you have a full set of Havaya. God's name is complete. There is a restoration of the full. Remember, man is always meant to, he was designed to project Tzelem Elokim. And therefore, he has to be right. He has to be a microcosm of Yud Kei Vav Kei. And if he's doing everything right and he's a complete, then there's a Yud Kei Vav Kei in all these dimensions. So somehow they were meant in union of male and female together. They could still restore some level. They could project this, and this is very exciting for them because until now they were just been thinking about. I mean, all the talking about how bad it is and how lost they are. Okay. V'shir ma'amra, and the verse explains her expression, her what she had said. Kaniti ish, I've acquired a man. V'gam et, together with the et, which is the ish's twin. Shehi isha, which is the woman. Hare Hashem shalem. Now you have a complete name, ba'arba otio, with 4 letters. Very nice. Okay, let's take a moment.
Oh, there's a lot to download.
Okay. O Yomar, alternatively, Veha Adam Yada, Etcha Ve'ishta. Ki hine be'avon Adam Ve'ishta, Chashish Hashema Asui Perud, Ben Yud He, Levav He, Shel Shem. So we know from many sources, those of us that learn Tanya, know that when there is a sin, when a person does a chet, so he actually severs, right? We understand that Yud Kei Vav Kei is a model of. There is the Yud Kei represents the Elyonim, and the Vav He represents the Tachtonim, and there's a Yichud that's supposed to be, and that there's a period Chas v'Shalom. There's a separation when, right? That's meaning just like we talked about that the Shechina Shara between Ish v'Isha, the Shechina Shara, so to speak, cosmically between when Yud Kei and Vav Kei are supposed to be connected when there's union, and when the Kruvim are facing the other way, so to speak, you have a period. So, but also that the Vav He within us, there's a He Tata, the last He in Yud Kei Vav Kei. So, like the Tanya will explain to you, that Tshuva means Tashuv He, you're returning the He back to the Shem Havaya after the sin. That's what Tshuva is supposed to do. So there is a period we know that in certain, when there's Chet, so there's Hastara, there is a lacking of a full expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world, and Ashras HaShechina, and there is a separation cosmically between Knesset Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and these are different periods that can be manifest, so to speak, in Shem Havai. Okay, so Chashasha, so Kihine be'avan Adam v'Ishto, after the sin between Adam and his Rebbetzin, Chashasha Shema Asu period bein Yud He Levav He Shel Shem. They thought Chas v'Shalom that they had made a period, a separation, a gap between the first half of Havaya's name and the second half. Oh, this is going to be so nice because, well, if we had another half hour, we got to the end of the shtickle, he would bring a mamish to this week's parsha, to Yisro and Melchemes Amalek. Okay. So, but he's just going to reference it for a second here. Okay, so what's this period between Yud Kei Vav Kei? V'chein efshar she'al kein amar hu yitbarach ki yad al keska. Ki lo yachzirem hu yitbarach li'itchaber ad yinakeh me'amalek shehu mitzad hanachash hahu kenoda. Okay, so he's just saying here that there is cosmically, there can be such a state that the world's in, where the only thing that's manifest in the world from Hashem's, the only ultimate manifestation that we have in this state is the Yud Kei, but not the Vav Kei. Because in the end of Parshas B'Shalach, with the first confrontation that we have, after Rephidim with Amalek, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Ki yad al keska, that God has his hand, he swears, right, by his kiseh, by his ability to be totally manifest in this world. When a king is sitting on his kiseh, that means that the king reigns and he is stationary and he is dominant. And the lacking of Hashem's kiseh in the world, so to speak, that expression means that there's only a Yud Kei, but the Vav He is missing. The ability for us to fully receive and express, is lacking as long as Amalek is running amok. So the destruction of Amalek ultimately is necessary in order to be able to rectify that state, to truly be able to join the Vav He with the Yud Kei. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu has made himself. He testifies that as long as Amalek's around, there is a lack of Vav He in the world. Okay, so the Alshech HaKadosh is referencing that, and they thought Chas v'Shalom, and in a way it's true. That's what the primal, the earliest form of this happened by the Eitz Hadas, because the Amalek is the ultimate expression of the Nachash in humanity, just like Yisrael is, right? We are a human demographic, which is the Merkava for the Koach HaTov in the world, for Yud Kei Vav Kei. So Amalek is mamish the merkava for the Nachash, and the Nachash caused that period that Akash ultimately says, in as far as Amalek is concerned, caused the period between Yud Kei and Vav Kei, right?
The problem is that that Chava retained the Vav He.
So remember that these are all in a continuum of micro and macro. This is whatever's going on at the level of Adam Chava is the level for humanity as cosmic male and female to be able to retain this ability. Whether it's manifest in the world, whether it's active in a time in history that there's a nation that's doing it, meaning they're all levels. Like we talked about Shechina. Shechina could be in a localized bubble, or it could be the ultimate level that everything is finally achieved, right? So here they're struggling with, in the continued legacy of humanity and what they have to do and have to be misakim, what have they retained the ability to do and what potential do they still have? That's how I would invite you to look at it.
But how would you explain the idea that the Vav He will only arrive at Mashiach when
Amalek is destroyed?
When the Malach is destroyed.
Yeah.
When Chava had the Vav He, it's the Yud He.
She didn't have a Vav He. She had a Vav He. Okay.
It's the Yud He that she didn't have.
She retained the ability for humanity to have a Vav He.
Yeah.
And indeed, the Imahos or Tikkun of Chava, they not only took that potential, they manifested it on a macro, like we talked about the Ol Sarah and the Ol Rivka, until that becomes the Simanim that the Shechina is showing in the Beis HaMikdash. Meaning Chava retained the potential for that, and actually later in history, there are individuals that made good on that and manifested that, but on a small scale. Okay, but we're looking for the ultimate. So in fact, the Machzor Vitri brings, Tosfos actually wants to bavar in him in the Gemara, but he brings, Machzor Vitri was one of the main students of Rashi, and he has a sitter, and he says that the kavana that you have when you say Amen Yehei Shmei Rabba is that Yehei Shmei, the name Shem Yud Kei, the name Yud Kei, Rabba should be complete, meaning it should be restored to Yud Kei Vav Kei. And he references the Battle of Amalek over there, and but that's for a different shir. Okay, so we're just referencing that over here, and we're saying that they were concerned after Chava was terrified that they were no longer able to be representatives of the cosmic male and female and be able to join the Yud Kei Vav Kei together. They no longer retained that. Okay. Okay, so v'zeh yomar, and that's why the verse says v'ha adam, and the man, as opposed to saying adam over here, meaning it's personal. We're talking about a man and his wife being engaged in an intimate act, and we're talking about v'ha adam as if we're talking about the species. So why? Because of the vav and the hey. We wanted to illustrate him here together with the vav and the hey. Bli chibur osios yud hey. He had the vav hey, but he didn't have the yud hey, right? Hayo be'avur ha'adam kasher yadet chava ishto. ובראותה כיוותה ותלת בתקיפות, בלי זמן עיבור ובלי חבלי יולדה, כמו שאמר ז"ל, מה ההיריון בלי צער, ככה לידה. Okay, so one second, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Okay, so he's saying like this. They were concerned, and they were aware that they only had the Vav He, as the Torah attests in the name of Veha Adam. And therefore, since after he knew her, he saw, because the pasuk testifies to the fact that it says Vatar Vatelet, and she conceived and she gave birth. And that's an illustration, Kifut, immediately, as if, like we said, right, the Medrash says that there was no process. How are we doing for time?
We're over.
Oh, okay. So let's just find a good line to stop at. Okay, so Blizman Ibor Bli Chevle Yoleda. So the Alshech is telling us, he's applying that midrash that explains that, two got on the bed and 7 got off the bed, that there was instantaneous, there was no process involved. So when he saw that, Kemosha Amruzal, Mahar Ayom Blitza Kachaleda, just like the pasuk compares the conception to the actual birth, just like the conception was without pain, so too her birth by Cain and Hava were without pain. And I'm going to end here, but I just want to say, and this was a sign to them because it was without pain. It seems to be that they had fixed themselves and freed themselves from the terrible sentence of Chava's curse, and therefore they had high hopes. That's going to be the approach, but we'll have to pick up next time. Baruch Hashem li'olam. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Zako Baruch.
I'm sorry, Rabbi Goldstein.
Welcome.
How you doing?
Thank God, we did the sound test.
Did we? I'm wondering, maybe I'll do the same shir. What if I do the same shir as last time?
totally up to you. It'll
Okay.
be nice that way we've got a continuation.
Right. Also, this one guy was pushing me. He's telling, "Can you leave me voice messages?" I said, maybe I'll do it again.
Do it again. Chazar is always good. Okay.
Okay. Should we warn whoever's tuned in, or we'll just go for it?
We're starting the Tanya.
Yeah. We're going to repeat last week's shiur because the recording got tripped up. Okay. In the previous recorded shiur, we left off by discussing the Alter Rebbe's revolutionary insight to Avodas Hashem, that as opposed to what we're used to thinking of two Yitzarim, two Yetzers, I'm going to give the same shiur as last time. Just there might be nuances, and hopefully, it says Divrei Torah Ashim b'makam echad v'ani b'makam acher. So maybe you say the same thing twice and it comes out differently and more internalized. So the chiddush, the innovation is that there's two souls and not just two yetzers, two inclinations. That the yetzer, each yetzer has its root deeper in like a whole consciousness of a nefesh, a whole structure, an essential structure. So in other words, it's not that, let's say the classic, the diet I'll start the diet tomorrow. So at night, it feels like I'm sick and tired of how I've been eating and how I feel physically. And tomorrow we'll start. So I'm thinking that in the morning, I'm going to have a clear head and I'm going to feel exactly like I feel right now. And then consequently, I'm going to eat properly. I'm going to have a wonderful, perfect day, and the next day, and the next day. That's not giving proper respect to where the battle actually lies. The battle lies much deeper. There are layers and layers and layers. The battle doesn't lie at mealtime. The battle lies way before mealtime. How I'm going to approach a meal. Am I going to approach it based on health considerations or based on desire considerations? Right? I know that when I get hungry, the ugly beast inside is going to want, you forgive me for this, yeah, I'm known. Is going to want the French fries and the fried foods and so on and so forth, right? If I wait, if I say, you know what, the battle starts when that desire comes. That's like a yetzer. Then I think there's a yetzer towards good eating and bad eating, and when the yetzer shows up, I'll defeat him. If I realize it's a nefesh, this is all a mushal, because this is not really Avodas Hashem necessarily, this is just being healthy. But if I realize the battle is much deeper, it's my whole approach, my outlook on what food is and how I approach it. That will actually change how I feel about it. That when it comes time to eat, I may still have that desire, but there's something deeper inside of me, a deeper desire to be a healthy person. And therefore, since I want that outcome, when the desire shows up for eating unhealthily, I've already defeated it before it showed up. Either I'm ready to fight it, because I remember I have an imprint of my original thinking when I actually convinced my world outlook so that the relationship with food is not about taste, but it's about energy and clean energy and so on. Just like I wouldn't feed my car olive oil or vinegar. I'd only feed it what's proper for it. I won't do that to my body. So even though if there's an imprint of that, when I have the desire to eat unhealthily, I'll be able to overcome that desire, or I will so internalize the message of what food is that I'll actually only desire food that's good for the body. That's a whole nother level. So lahavdil, what the Alter Rebbe is saying is there's two nefashis, there's two souls, there's two full structures of identity in the person. He's about to introduce us to one of them. One is called the Klippa soul, which we'll talk about, and one is called the Godly soul, which we'll talk about in the next chapter. Meaning one soul's whole identity, not a yetzer, not that later when I'm hungry, I'm going to want to eat according to desire, not according to some godly end. But its whole structure, its whole world view is based on pleasure and not based on connection to something higher than itself. And then in other words, it has an intellect part to it. It's a worldview. It has a embedded love and desire for things that fit with its worldview. And therefore, it has those actual practical desires when the food gets in front of him or whatever challenge gets in front of him. And if I realize that, and I can, one of the ways to defeat that is to explain to that animal side of myself what true goodness really is. Just like in the analogy that if I explain to my body that what's really good for you is not taste, what's really good for you is clean energy, it should have an effect. If my godly side explains to my animal side what's really good for you is a relationship with the divine and beyond the physical plane and beyond whatever strange desires I might have, it should have an effect. Okay, that's the basic premise. Now we get introduced to the animal soul. For those who are counting at home, we're on page Hey Amud Beis, side 2, aka page 10. Okay. So why do we mention this? Why do we mention these two souls? Because when we understand a lot about these two souls and their interplay, we understand their makeup and their interplay, then we will be able to understand who really is this Beinoni that we're looking for. And don't forget, this is the book of the Beinoni, of the intermediate man, meaning of the average man. Of everyday man can reach very high spiritual heights in his connection to Hashem, even in Ubelavavcha, even in his heart, can actually control his desires. So first we have to understand what makes us tick. And the Rachav says, in the writings of the Rizal, Chaim Vital says, these two souls, which the Alter Rebbe has explained, are at battle. And here we go. Towards the bottom of the page, it says, Achas, one of the souls, Mitzada Klipa v'Sitra Achra, comes from Klipa and Sitra Achra. So Klipa, so the words, there's more than two words, but essentially two words for the other side. Sitra Achra is the other side, describing not Kedusha, as we'll explain better in Perek Vav in chapter 6. And Klipa means a shell. So when you take something for its external, you don't relate to its internal. So let's go back to our good example of food. I'm saying the camera is this way, but everybody on the other side is eating. So I apologize to the crowd and whoever's eating dinner at home. A klipa food, external food, the externalities of food is taste, smell, sight. So look good, smell good, taste good. And if I connect to that, not necessarily, that's the external. I need that in order to ingest it. To make, Hashem did us a favor to make our sustenance covered in something that we can swallow. Okay, but if I'm looking at the pneumius, I'm looking beyond the outer shell, the real goodness of food is the energy that it gives me. So if I can relate to something deeper, then I have a better relationship with food than if I'm relating just the external. Okay, so Hashem now we're talking about godliness and klipa. Hashem, everything in the world has godliness. It can't exist unless Hashem is making it exist. That's its godly soul. Everything has a soul. Even a rock has a soul. Just to be existing, Hashem brings it out of nothingness into somethingness and maintains its existence, which is the whole subject of Book 2 of Tanya. That's the soul of every living thing, of every existing thing. But klipa means that I get a little bit caught up or completely caught up in the shell. Just like on a shell of something, if you don't know what a banana is, you might think you don't even know there's food here. You have to discover it and happen upon it by peeling off the shell and seeing the sweet fruit and beneficial, healthy fruit inside, or an egg or anything like that. So being stuck with the external covers on the benefit. So what klipa means is that the godliness, which is per force inside of everything that exists, is not readily accessible. It doesn't shine. Okay. So that's klipa, and that's the other side. What's the other side of kedusha? The other side of holiness is covered on holiness. It doesn't realize its godly existence, its godly goal, end, and so on. So this klipa, one soul that every human has, every Jew has, comes from klipa and sitra achra. It's a klipa soul, meaning this soul, when it recognizes itself, not godliness. Like if I recognize food for the external, I recognize taste, not energy. So it doesn't recognize its godliness, it only recognizes some self-natural identity. This is the vitalizing, it's the one that dresses up in the blood. Blood is the life force of living beings. It flows through the veins and through the body. If, God forbid, circulation is cut off, you can have what's called a dead limb, and you have to be even removed because it infects the rest of the body because it's connected to death, God forbid. So blood is the life force. There's vitality in the blood, the actual something you can't touch with the five senses. It's spiritual. It's a life force. The difference between a living entity and a dead entity, a living cat. In Tsfat, we have a lot of live cats, and you can see a dead cat once in a while. There's no distinction between the two of them that's palpable to the hands or to the, well, after a few minutes, or it could be smell, right? Or hands, it becomes hard and so on. But that instant between life and death, you can see the vitality is gone, but you can't point to vitality. You can't tell me what color it is, how much it weighs. It doesn't exist in terms it's spiritual. So that vitality that flows through the veins of a person, it comes from what's called a vitalizing soul. It's a nefesh habahamis, an animal, fleshy soul. Here he calls it a fleshy soul. Like the pasuk says, ki nefesh habasar b'damhi, because the fleshy soul is in the blood. That's a pasuk, meaning there's a vitalizing soul of the body. The natural soul, sometimes called the natural soul, which will be important in a moment. And from it comes, from this vitalizing soul, it's made up of four negative attributes, which are made up of the four negative elements. So in Torah talks about the Rambam and Sefer Hakira philosophy and Kabbalah talks about the four elements. Not to say that these are the smallest particles in existence, but everything is made up of these four. They are the classic earth, wind, water, and fire. Depending on the mizug, lost the word here. Or how they're blended together, okay, makes the character of the person. This is the natural soul. So there's the argument in the philosophical and science world of nature versus nurture, and of course the conclusion is it's both. Everybody has a certain nature, and that nature dictates a lot of his own personality and behavior. We're talking here about the natural character of a person, from just having a vitalizing soul. Since a soul, then everything is made up of these four elements. So every character is made up of these four, and depending on your mizug and your what did I say before? The mixture of these elements is your character. So some people will see the character traits, and we're calling them evil character traits. They're called evil because they cover up ungodliness and they're self-involved. So we're going to have taiva as one, because we're talking about a lot of food. Now we're done eating, so we can talk about it freely and together. Lusting for things just for pleasure's sake. That can get you lost very easily. Right? Go back to our food. Go back to our food one last time for the day. Right? And I promise you, I will bring up food many, many more times over the first 6 chapters. 7 chapters, actually. Go back to our food one last time for the day. The lust for the external, for food, it obviously can lead a person astray. Right? If I'm in it for just the desire, so that's not healthy. It's not healthy physically. It's not healthy mentally, financially. Right? You're just lost. There's no value system other than the desire. Whereas what if I desire health? Actually, that's also not actually the best. Right? Sometimes there are things that trump eating in a healthy way. I might have to run. I'm on the run to go help somebody who's in need. But no, I didn't have my balanced meal. So obviously there's a value system here. But if I'm stuck in lust, it's never going to go well. There's a character who's angry by nature. There's a character who's timid by nature. Some people are more outgoing. Some people more. A lot of it is nurture, but a lot of it is nature. So here we're saying it comes from this vitalizing soul. There's an animal soul, animalistic vitalizing soul, that enlivens every single one of us and makes up our natural character. So here the Alter Rebbe describes. So dehainu, meaning kas v'gaiva miyisayda eish sheneg b'lamayla. Anger and haughtiness come from the element of fire, because the nature of fire is hot. That's hot-headed, like angry, and it goes up like haughtiness. It feels higher than everybody else, superior. So he lifts himself up. Those are negative character traits, obviously. Delights, physical delights, which come from the water of the soul. Water is connected to delight, as it makes the fruits sweeter. The growth of fruit on the tree makes them sweet, and the desire of the sweetness of fruit or anything juicy. I said I wouldn't mention fruit again, but I want the French fries that I saw on the other side. If once they cool off and they become dry, right? I see the faces, especially after we're done eating. Like you don't want to eat them anymore. But when there's the greasy and so on, so there's a certain taiva in them. Okay, so water and juiciness is the part element that draws you to tainug, to delight, to taiva rather. So scoffing and frivolousness and boasting and just stam talking about nothing, wasting time, like speech about nothing. You ever been in one of those conversations?
Yeah.
It's pretty often, right? We all take part in those conversations. That comes from Yesod HaRuach. It has no substance. So here he mentions like air. There's no real substance to it. So here he mentioned boasting. So the difference between boasting and haughtiness, which was mentioned by fire, is haughtiness, you have what to back it up. You really are better than everybody else. And you feel it and you know and you let everybody else know it. Boasting is fake. You know, you talk about how you had the greatest whatever back, but you're lying about it, right? It's just hot air, empty air as opposed to hot air. And laziness and depression, sadness, downness from earth, the element of earth, which is heavy. Okay, people who are sad are heavier. Lazy is a heaviness. So again, you can kind of figure out what your mizug might be. What your potion, Hashem's natural potion for you. Again, you don't know how much is nurture, but the inner makeup of your character, how much towards anger, how much towards lust, how much toward whatever it might be, is made up, is your natural character that's flowing through your veins. It's part of it. It's part of your nature. V'ga, I mean, here's the big chiddush of this whole thing. This animal soul. V'ga midas on the top of Amud Aleph. V'ga midas hateves shebeteva kol Yisrael betul doisam kamei rachmanus v'il chasadim ba'is mimenu. That also the good character traits that are natural to a Jew, such as they're inborn, such as being the signs of being a Jew, as I mentioned in the Gemara. Of them, two are mentioned here: being merciful and being kind. Also come from this klippa, from the second soul, which is klippa. Why is it klippa? How do we know it comes from the klippa soul? Because it's natural. Just like I have a natural character that's with all these other tendencies that are negative, I have a natural character to be drawn towards these good character traits. If it's going to be godly, it's got to take hard work. To reveal the deep godliness inside of every undertaking takes what's called a Veda, an inner deep dive inside of my psyche to transform myself to be beyond myself. Here, I have character traits that they might be selfless, but they're natural. And at the end of the day, it means it comes from my own character, my own self. That's klippa. Why does a Jew have natural character, klippa character traits, natural, that are good? How could it be? So it says the Alter Rebbe, Ki b'Yisrael nefesh zu de klippa hi miklipas nega. Because in a Jew, this klippa soul, this soul which is the vitalizing soul, the covering on godliness, not recognizing its godly core soul, comes from what's called klipas nega, which means a shiny shell. Sheish ba gam kein tev, which also has good in it. V'hi misoid eitz hadas tevera, and it's from the secret, the Kabbalistic reality of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which means that everything is mixed up of good and evil. So klipas nega, which is the shining shell, the vast majority of things in existence, have their godly core from the shiny shell. So too the natural soul of a Jew. What's the shiny soul? Means that the klipa, if you put a covering on something, it could be opaque, or it could be translucent. It could also be transparent, but here we're talking about more translucent. That there's sparks of the goodness, of the godliness that come through. They don't come through as clear light, so they don't come through as godly. They come through as good. Okay, so we're going to speak about what do we mean difference between God and good. Just one L. Okay, but what's the difference between godly, goodly, and what we'll call ra? Sometimes we're going to say good that is evil. Okay, so we're going to have three types of good. We have good that is actually evil in the language of Torah, in the language of Tanya, meaning we wouldn't necessarily call it evil, as we'll see in a second. The way we interact with our human neighbors, we wouldn't necessarily call it evil, but we're going to call it evil. Good that is evil. Good that is good, actually, but not godly. And then good that is actually true goodness and godly. Okay? To understand that, we have to say something a little more controversial. If you remember from last time we did this. Mashe enke nafshes umasayila. This is not the case. We said that by a Jew, his natural and vitalizing animal soul come from klipas noiga, the shiny shell, and therefore it has natural flowing through his veins and his nature of his character, also has good character traits. That's not the case with the souls of the nations of the world. Hein mashar klipas tameis. They come and derive from the other impure klipas. She'ein behem tev klal, that they have no good whatsoever. Dramatic pause. Like it says in the writings of the Arizal. So what do we mean by no good whatsoever? So we have two problems with that. Okay, not problems, two points on that. Number one is everything has good. We already said everything has a nefesh, even a rock. That's godliness. There's godliness embedded inside of everything that exists. It is the actual internal substance of everything that exists and the vitality of every vegetable, of every animal, of every human. So how can it be they have no good whatsoever? So we said the klipa, which covers on godliness, sometimes it's opaque. So it can't realize its own godliness. It can't actually connect. It's opaque. So in other words, for sure there's good, there's godliness there, but it's inaccessible. That's one point. The other point is right here, v'chol tivei da'avdin u'mesa'ilam legarmeu avdin. So every good thing, all the kindness that the nations do, so on the one hand, we're calling it good and kindness, but all that they do is for their own sake. They do it for selfish reasons. As it says in the Gemara on the pasuk, the kindness, again, the pasuk says the kindness of the nations, but then it says is sin. So we're not talking about their outright stealing or anybody's outright stealing. That's obviously not good. So the kindness that they do is called sin. So we'll discuss it in a moment. That all the righteousness and kindness that the nations of the world do is only for their own sake. So what do we mean? So there are a lot of subtle levels here, okay? I preface by saying I could think of a lot of wonderful non-Jewish people that are kind and not looking to harm anybody. And I can think of a lot of Jews, unfortunately, Havdil, don't fit in that category. Whether it's by nature or nurture or whatever, they're not necessarily. They sometimes do actually not only want to harm people, they outwardly harm people. So here I'm saying that Jews have good that's natural, and non-Jews, whatever they do, sin. So how does this work? So it depends on how we define good and evil. If good is selfless, godliness is beyond human, and evil is selfish. So this will put everything in perspective. And selfish, by the way, we have to define also, because there's different levels of selfish. So let's start with what we're calling evil. If I do you a favor, and I really just want to take advantage of you later. So what did you receive? A favor. You're like, oh, he's great. You're going to talk about it and wonderful. All he does is favors, but really I'm just trying to set you up. So that's clear that the goodness that I did is really negative. What if I do a favor and it's not that I'm looking to take advantage of you, but I'm waiting later, you're going to do me a favor? It's still selfish. What if I do a favor and I'm not trying to take advantage of you? I'm not trying to say later, oh, he's going to do me a favor, but I know that what people are going to say about me, wow, that guy, he's great. He does everybody favors. Still selfish. There's even deeper level. So the example is if how about a bird? I wouldn't hurt a fly, and if a bird is suffering, I'll make sure to call the authorities to make sure to bring this bird back to health. If they don't come, I'll do it myself. So am I caring about the bird? Seems like it. But it could very well be that I just myself have a spot inside myself that can't stand to see the bird suffer. Okay, so I once asked a young student, a woman, a girl, who was in Save the Whales. So I was giving also a course on animal rights connected to the Torah's Tzar Ba'alei Chaim, don't harm animals, okay? So I asked her, save the whales, so why? Because they're animals, they're God's creatures. Okay, are you a vegetarian? Yeah. Okay, I want to, and I'd be a vegan too, from the way they treat the animals to get the milk and to get the eggs and so on. It's not about, I don't mind having the milk and having the eggs, but the way they're treated in industry and so on is horrible, and I protest and so on and so forth. So great, do you kill a mosquito? Well, yeah, I mean, they can harm you. I said, what about a cockroach? I said, do you spray your house for cockroaches? Do you have them? Absolutely. Okay, but what's the difference between the cockroach and the cat? The cat's cute. Haven't met anybody yet who thinks a cockroach is cute. Okay, so the relationship is really it's there's something nice about it. There's something even lofty about it, that I care for other creatures. There's something godly potentially about it. I care about other creatures, but there's a limit, and it's based on my own feelings. So that's some sort of indicator, at least, that my relationship and my goodness is self-serving. Okay. Now, again, I'd rather be a neighbor with somebody who's like save the whales, as long as they're not like crazy and like they want to beat up the people who don't save the whales. Like people go fishing, they get beat up. It's another story. So there's different levels. What the Alter Rebbe is saying, and it's somewhat of a hard pill to swallow. What the Alter Rebbe is saying is that when the kindness by a non-Jew, by the way, there's Chassidim Masailam. There are non-Jews who can do true kindness. Okay, the special category. They've reached this category of Chassidim Masailam, righteous Gentiles, who perform the 7 Noahide laws and so on. They could fit in this category. But when in a regular situation, a non-Jew is doing something, there's always going to be some ulterior motive. And by the way, he might be an amazing person who, in his mind, again, he's not looking for anything in return, just wants to feel good. That's wonderful. We're saying by a Jew that natural to him, his kindness is natural, that he does it because a person is meant to be kind. In other words, it's not necessarily about what I don't need to or want to even subconsciously receive anything from it. But it's still not godly, because it's about being human as opposed to being godly. Mm-hmm. It's proper human behavior to treat people well because they deserve to be treated well, not because it makes me feel good or I have any other benefit from it. But that's humanity. That's inborn to a Jew. These traits of Rahmanis and Goimel Chasadim, compassionate and bestowing kindness. I think it's disproportionate tzedakah and charity in the world from Jews to non-Jews and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter if they're religious or not religious. Okay, but then there's godly, and godly is a whole nother undertaking. I'm not kind because it's natural and because it's simple. It has nothing to do with me, even perfection of humanity. It's uplifting and elevating myself to a brand new level. So we have 3 types of goodness: godliness, which is totally beyond humanity. Goodness, which means being a human, understanding, and it's natural to a Jew, understanding that there's a way to behave based on objectivity, and then there's subjective. The Alter Rebbe was what time we are?
We're done.
We're done. I'll just tell the quick story. How many are we over?
Yeah, no, we're fine.
The Alter Rebbe was. They tell the story in conjunction with this last piece. The Alter was arrested and freed eventually at Tes Kislev. Our first class was at Tes Kislev, by the way. They asked him a bunch of questions. He was being tried for treason. He was Malshinis. I don't remember. What? They informed on him based on his writings. He wants to overthrow the government. He talks about kingship of the Jewish people returning and so on. He doesn't believe in the Tsar, all these kinds of things. The death penalty. But they asked him a bunch of questions, and he answered them all, and they saw he's a very insightful human being, and they even probably sensed holiness there. And the last question they asked him was, you wrote in your book that all kindness of the non-Jews is sin. So the Alter Rebbe, this is what it says, the Alter Rebbe just smiled. And they didn't ask him anymore. They quote the Alter Rebbe later as saying that his intention with the smile was, I've answered everything already. You know that everything I answer you makes perfect sense. Are you sure you want me to answer this? And they understood. So very take good. It or leave it, but that's the MS.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, hit this?
Yeah. I just want to show it to you.
Oh, he's going to do it? Go ahead. Go this way.
Excellent.
Erev Tov, go ahead.
No, don't. And then Ramko. The floor is yours.
I should. Yeah, you do. You ready to go?
Ready to go. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Good evening to you at home. Good evening to you here. Little recap. If there's anyone joining for the first time, I'm not a rabbi. My name is Doron Yitzchak Gibor, and I'm a specialty coach. I help people break through unconscious blockages, things that just seem like bad luck. Banai Chayim Mazonai is what they're called in the Torah, and they are Banai is my children, which is intimate relationships. Chayai is my life, which is chronic health, and Mazonai is my food or my sustenance, which is income or an income ceiling. So these are the three main blockages, but truth be told is that a blockage could feel like any loop that you're caught in and anything that you can't get out of. Sometimes it's something, let's call it trivial, like it's irritating, but it's not very massive. Just trying to think of something trivial. Not finding parking, when you're going to a meeting, or always being late. But then there's also like serious things like being caught in a depression, being caught in a loop or a repeat cycle of having a relationship end, usually in the same way or in a similar way. And just anything that seems to be on, like I said, repeat, that may seem like bad luck. So it turns out that there is a structure to all of this. And as I've alluded to in previous installments, that the key to breaking through these three areas of blockages lies in a part of the mind called the shadow. Okay, now shadow is the English term. The person that came up with this thing called shadow was a guy called Carl Jung. But in the Torah, shadow, it basically, really from an esoteric sense, it carries very much the same meaning. Okay, so a lot of esoteric studying, a lot of esoteric or Hasidic talk that's spoken about in the Zohar and Hasidus, it talks about light, right? It talks about the Or Ein Sof, it talks about a bright light, in the Zohar it talks about a light that doesn't shine, or a light that has no light. Like in inanimate objects and the minerals, they're called Nahoira Deloy, I can't remember the term, but basically lights that don't shine. So the concept of light, and therefore when there's an obstruction, shadow or darkness, these are the most, let's call it primary or the most esoteric terms that we can speak in. So in the outer world, if I have light and I want to create shadow, what do I need to do in order to create shadow? I need to obstruct the light. And once I obstruct the light, then there's a shadow, and then there's also a cast of the shadow, the shape of the shadow. So what we're seeing on the floor, if you stop the light, if you obstruct light, and you see the shadow on the floor, the one that grows as it goes closer to the light, that's actually not the shadow. That's actually the cast of the shadow. In Hebrew, the tzura, the shape of the shadow. And the actual shadow is the exact outline of the obstruction. Okay, does that make sense? The exact outline of the obstruction, that's on the other side of that, where it's completely dark, that's the shadow, that's the tzel. And anything beyond that is an emanation, let's call it, of the shadow, the tzura. So I'm forgetting the source. I think it was in Torah Or by the Alter Rebbe, where he speaks about the bracha at Sheva brachas, where it says Asher Yatzar et Adam b'tzalmo b'tzelim dmut tavnito. He speaks there about Asher Yatzar. You can read it as Yatzar milshon Yetzira, that he created Adam b'tzalmo, created man in his image. But you can also read it as Tzura, that he shaped, he gave shape to this thing. Adam, he gave shape to this thing called Adam. Bit Salmo, and again, Tselem is image or encapsulation, but it's also the shorish of Tselem is Tsel. So, how do we create shadow outside in the outside world? We take light, we obstruct the light, we create shadow, and it's cast. How does shadow get created inside the mind? Well, according to Rabbi Nachman in Likutei Moharan, it's the exact same way that there is an obstruction of the light. Rabbi Nachman in Kuf Ayin Beis, it's in Torah 172 in Likutei Moharan, he speaks there about how he calls it chesronot, all the disadvantages or the lackings that a person has in their life, and he says whether in money, relationships, or health, he actually says those three things, they come onto a person by a person's own ma'asim ra'im, by their own bad deeds, whatever that means, if it's averot, whether it's chatayim, sins or transgressions. But what he says is that the shadow, which is an obstruction of the light, comes about because of a person's own deeds. He goes on to say that the light of Hashem is flowing always. Shofea alav tamid. It's always flowing. It's always continuously and never not flowing. And then what creates the shadow is the person's own deeds. He goes on to say that the solution is different aspects of Torah and different aspects of learning. And I'm going to be very honest, I don't know how to do what he says. I don't know how to heal myself the way that he says. I've tried. And I'm not saying that it can't be done. If Rabbi Nachman said it can be done, then like it can definitely be done. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. I personally, in my experience, I don't know how to do that. I do know other ways, and in a nutshell, it's all about self-acceptance, not the acceptance of the person that I'm aware of in the mirror, but rather acceptance of unconscious elements of myself that need sort of to be facilitated, right? I'll explain why. But the nutshell of all the healing is self-acceptance. So just like Yitzchak loved Esav, and why do I mention Esav specifically? Because if you think about the yin and the yang, if you talk about like two things, a light and a dark, a good and a bad, that they're all part of one thing, then the archetypal characters in Jewish literature that embody that polarity are Yaakov and Esav. Why? Because one was the good, one was the bad, if you want to call it, and they both occupied the same space. They were in the same womb. They were, if I'm not mistaken, I think twins come from the same seed or the same sperm. So there's still a oneness that got expressed itself into two-ness. And this duality was Yaakov and Esav. We also know that Yaakov was, it says Ishtam, which you can look as tam means perfect, but not in perfection. Perfection as in innocence and untainted. I spoke about in a different installment how Yaakov had to go through a wounding. He had to go through specifically a betrayal of his father. That's how he got the Bechorah. That's how he got the right of the firstborn, was through a betrayal, something that he would not be okay with. It would be a wound in his own mind, and therefore he would then be subject to the darkness and the light, the Zelu Matzeh, the yin and the yang, because he came from a place of tam. So I mentioned that before, but why is self-acceptance so important? Because it says Yaakov loved Esav, Yitzchak loved Esav. It's very, very, very specific. It says that in the Torah, and the Torah doesn't mince words, that Yitzchak loved Esav. Now, if Esav truly was evil and needed to be hated, then surely his own father would be aware of this. But we see that wasn't the case. And in the end, we know that Esav does tshuva, and that Yaakov always wanted a relationship with his brother. The same thing happens is that inside every person, malasod, what can we do? That the design of the world is that we've got a part of ourselves that we love, we've got a part of ourselves that we don't love. Okay, that's just how it goes. What part of ourselves do we not like? Well, this part is called the shadow. This part is called the tzel, because I don't know if you've seen movies where a guy, kosher movies, of course, where a guy stands in a shadow. He stands in the shade, like an undercover cop or maybe a bad guy, and he's standing in the shade and you can't see him at all. He's completely in darkness. You cannot see him. He can see you, but you can't see him. So because the shadow has this ability to make something visible, make it invisible or unseen. And so these are the parts of ourselves that lie in these shadows. I have mentioned before, and I'll mention again briefly, how to go about them and what it is that needs to be uncovered in order for you to have some self-awareness and some self-acceptance in this specific regard. Because if you don't know how to do it, if you don't know what needs to be done, it can be very debilitating. And if you happen to be stuck in a loop of depression where these beliefs like I'm not good enough or I'm not worth anything, or if they're really strong, it's not for nothing. Your neshama is going through a purification, and if you're old enough to know that when suffering needs to end, it ends like instantly when it needs to end. If you look back at your life, and most people know about times they went through suffering. And then when a solution came about, it brought the suffering to an end. Whether it was, let's say, what's coming to my mind now is, let's say, a court case. When it's done, it's done. The reason for this is because suffering, as is learned in Kabbalah, suffering is a purification of the levushim of the neshama, the garments of the neshama. So when a Jew does a mitzvah, then he creates a patch, a garment for his neshama that his neshama will slip into when it's time. And for every transgression, the patch doesn't go away, but it does get dirtied. And so these stains on the levushim is basically the reason why we go through suffering. And the system is designed in such a way that our suffering is a contraction that always ends in an expansion. So whatever suffering you're going through, it's not for nothing, and it will end at some point. The same way that when an archer wants to shoot, let's say he's got 2 arrows and he wants to shoot the one 50 meters and he wants to shoot the other one 200 meters. So in the 50-meter target, he'll put 50 meters worth of negative tension into the arrow, and for the 200 one, he'll put 200 meters worth of tension into the arrow. Right, and even if he's putting more than 50, let's say he's putting 60 or 70, he's not going to put 200 meters worth of tension into a target that's 50 meters away. The point is that when there's enough negative tension in the arrow in order to propel it, he simply lets go, and then all the dynamics change, and the laws of nature kick into play, and the arrow soars towards its target. But also to keep in mind, what's important is that the arrow knows to differentiate between the distance of the 50-meter target and the distance of the 200-meter target. And what he's going to put into the type of tension or pain that he's going to inflict to the bow and the arrow, one's going to be 50 meters worth, the other one's going to be 200 meters worth, and they're not going to be the same. So the one's going to be more intense than the other. So the same thing is that if you're going through, or you know someone that's going through something, so first of all, just know that there is something to do about it. There are healing methods and there are healing techniques that I will mention that you can make use of them. I'm talking about this now is because I've actually had quite a few people reach out to me after watching some of these videos, and some people are just going through a lot of emotional pain and turmoil. And I want you to know that there is something to be done. It doesn't have to be medication, and if someone's on medication, I'm not knocking it. Just that medication doesn't heal wounds. It treats symptoms, and so we're here essentially to heal our wounds. And the only way that that can happen is if you are caused enough inconvenience in your life that you cannot be distracted by anything else, and you have to deal with it. So until there comes that point, unless you're a person that is so inclined that I want to heal my wounds no matter what, and this is why I'm here, and you're someone that goes on retreats and you go on workshops and you do these things because this is what you want to do. If you're not a person like that and you just want to get on with life, and you want to achieve your goals, there's nothing wrong with that. Just know that your wounds at some point will make themselves so known that you will not have a choice at some point but to actually deal with the wounds and not to take something that's going to make the pain go away. But the other point I want to make about this, and this was talking about the time of pain, is just you're going through the pain that you're going through. If you are going through pain, it's from a very high spiritual place. Okay, suffering comes from is in the name of Hashem. You've got if we divide into Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, if we divide it into two groups, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, the Yud and the Hey is the hidden world. It's called Alma di Iskasia, the hidden worlds, right? And Vav Hey is Alma di Iskalia, the revealed worlds. And we know, I think it's in contra which Perik in Tehillim, but David HaMelech says, "Ashrei hagever asher tihasrenoka mitoratcha tamdenu." That happy or blessed is, or fortunate is the man, asher tihasrenoka, that he gets put through suffering, yisurim, from a place of the Yud and the Hey, which is of these hidden worlds. And so, whatever pain you're going through, it's not. There's no conspiracy against you. In fact, there's a conspiracy for you. And there is there is an end in sight. There is an end at some points. You're going through an exact amount of contraction in order to have your purification of your levushim, but also to create enough force, enough potential in order for you to expand to where it is that you need to expand to. So far, so good. Cool. So the way that this is designed, in order for us to have these shadows, why is it important to have shadows? Because until Mashiach comes and the program that we live in changes from a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and Hey to a Yud and a Hey and a Yud and a Hey. We know this because in the end of Aleinu it says Bayom Hahu Yiyeh Hashem Echad U'Shem Echad, that Hashem's name will be Yudka Yudka. That until that time, the way that the world is designed is that in order for things to expand, they have to contract first. In order for there to be an aliyah, there has to be a yerida first. That's the way it has to be. Now, what that means on a much deeper level is that in order for me as an adult, in order for you as an adult, and in order for your kids as adults, in order for them to have purpose and to be kalim, vessels for an emotional experience called fulfillment, which is basically your shlichut. When you experience fulfillment, you get this. It's almost like a rush. There's an emotion, a very good emotion that a person experiences when they're experiencing fulfillment. That it's like it's a knowing that this is what I'm meant to do, and you never get bored of it, right? You never get bored of it, which if you think about it, is actually a bit of an anomaly, because when a human being does something over and over again, you get bored. But when you do your purpose over and over again, not only do you not get bored, you get fired up, and as if you're doing it for the first time, there's something neurological that happens, and that's why it's based on childhood wounding. There's a neurological wiring that prevents me from getting bored, and in actual fact does the exact opposite. So what this means, good people, is that in order for you to have purpose and an opportunity or a chance even to experience fulfillment, that means that you have to have wounding. You have to have the negative imprint. So if those of you that remember Kodak pictures, first came the negative, there was a negative imprint. That's what gets developed. And then you have the positive picture that goes into the album, that goes into your coffee table. But all of that could not happen without a negative imprint. Okay? Going deep today for a change. Where does this negative imprint come from? It comes from a design called, not only, but also, this is what puts it all together, it comes from a design called the Yetzer Hara. You can call it the evil inclination, but when a person says evil inclination, I think they sort of miss the technical characters or the technical characteristics or properties of what the Yetzer Hara is. So, as I mentioned before, Yetzer means drive or an urge, but it also means create. Right? Then from the world of Yetzira. Yetzira means to fashion something that's been created. Bria is actually created from nothing, but Yetzira is something that gets created from something, or fashion rather, something that's already been created. Ex nihilo. And hara means that of evil, right? It does not mean evil. So if it was evil, it would be Yetzer Ra, just like the good inclination is called Yetzer Tov and not Ha Tov. So this is the Yetzer Ha-Ra, right? Of evil. That means that just enough was taken and inserted into us so that it could work its magic, okay? And I'll explain by work its magic. The example that I like to give to explain the technical brilliance of the Yetzer Hara, which is, let's call it a self-critical default setting. So if you were an engineer or a designer, and I said to you, I'm going to give you this bow and an arrow, and what I want you to do for this bow is I want you to design a mechanism that goes onto this bow, and it's a smart mechanism. So it picks up when you put the arrow into the bow, it picks up that there's an arrow in the bow, and it automatically begins to find the right angle based on the size of the bow and the weight of the arrow. And then it begins to pull back the arrow to its maximum contraction. And then once there's the maximum amount of contraction at the most ideal angle, it also lets go of the string and shoots the arrow to its maximum expansion. So we could basically call that an automatic arrow firing mechanism, okay, which would be brilliant. So that's basically what the Yetzer Hara is. It's a continual contraction on an emotional level, on a mental level. I do not think that it's on a spiritual level because the neshama is pure. But there's this continual contraction in the form of self-criticism or a default self-critical thinking that guarantees that there's always going to be a contraction of my being. There's always going to be, if I'm a spring, someone that's going to, or something that's going to push me down and contract me. If I'm an arrow, there's always going to be something that's going to like create this bow and then release it, guaranteeing what? My maximum expansion. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It sucks for us, at least some of the time. And the thing is that while we're these arrows flying through the air, because we've got a memory and an ego, an identity, we hate the arrow and we hate the archer for all the pain that it put us through when we were in the bow, which is where healing comes in, because healing is basically reconciling the gifts that I have with how I got those gifts. For 5 minutes, I'm watching.
Well, I was looking at something else.
Reconciling the gifts that I have with how they got there, because human gifts, they don't come in wrappings. Human gifts come in wounding. Human gifts come in wounding. So where I'm wounded, I'm the most accomplished, says Carl Jung. And where something hit me the hardest, it means the most to me. Yeah, that's an easy way of understanding it.
Mm-hmm.
Where I got hit the hardest, it means the most to me. So this is the result of an imprint. So see, we are running out of time, and there is not a chance that I'm going to be even 1 minute late this week. So I'm going to end off with just giving some resources for people that might be going through things and would like to let's see, even heal themselves. So first of all, shadow work is, while it's highly effective, it's grueling and demanding and needs facilitation. And because the results can be so massive on the other side, it's usually not cheap. Okay, if a person is going to double or triple their income, they're not gonna get it for a couple $100. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm saying that it needs to be facilitated, and if you're going through a lot of pain, it may not be the right thing. So the healing techniques that I endorse, that you can check out online on YouTube or wherever you want, is you've got something called the Sedona method, which is a form of letting go. It's really cool and really simple. It's actually mind-blowing how simple it is and how it works. My number one go-to healing technique, which works on meridians, which is basically the same process as acupuncture, is called EFT tapping, emotional freedom technique. But if you go on to, if you do a Google search and look for tutorials on EFT tapping, you'll find everything that you can think of, and it really, really, really works. It really works. It's amazing. Those are the two that I'm going to leave you with tonight, because there are other things, but they require a lot of facilitation. CBT is fantastic, but it requires facilitation. What I love about Sedona is that it's so easy to let go of something. And what I love about EFT is that the basis of it is accepting myself, forgiving myself, and loving myself despite anything and everything that's going on the outside. It's quite a it's quite mind-boggling for me that if I'm angry with someone else and I start doing this tapping technique, then I don't speak about the other person at all. I just basically say I love and accept and forgive myself, and the anger goes away. There happens to be a Jewish source for this, and that is this: because we're tapping on meridians, or if it's acupuncture, the needles go into meridians. Meridians are lines of energy through which the energy in the body flows. If they're blocked, then there is some sort of discomfort. But there are 15 body sfirot, and in Chassidut they're referred to as the 15 yesodot, and yesod means element. And we can see them in the Siddur after Shema. V'yatzi v'nachon v'kayim v'yasher v'neman v'ahov v'chaviv v'nechmad v'nayim v'nor v'adir u'metukan u'mekuba v'tov v'yafeh. So those are the 15, and the 7 energy system, which is referred to as chakras. Those 7 points are actually part of the 15 body sfirot. So they're actually part of it. If you want to look this up, you can get a book called Body, Mind, and Soul by Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg, and he refers about these points on page number 100. One of my favorite books. So that is all for tonight. Wishing everybody a wonderful week. Those of you, people have reached out to me. If you want to, you're welcome to. I've got a lot of resources on my website, www.breakthroughmatrix.com. And if I can help anyone, I'd be more than happy to. Wishing everybody a wonderful week. Thank you for your attention, and have a good Shabbos.
Thank you very much, Joe. Hopefully for next week.
On the dot, Goodman.
A bit messed up this evening.
And another Shlomo tonight.
No. All right. Close myself. Okay.
So you ready?
Yeah.
Started?
Yeah. Okay. Continuing in the Maharal, let's see this Oilam. Wasn't able to prepare quite as much this week because I was planning to get it earlier and things got messed up, so I got it kind of late. So at least part of it is prepared. This is on the subject of Torah. We're continuing examination of many of the Agadata, talking about the proper approach and hashkafa to look at learning Torah and how it's distinct from many other types of mitzvahs and other types of activities. Right, he starts with in Perek Chelik, Sanhedrin, in this Perek of Agadata in the Gemara. Durish Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbi Simon. Oh my gosh. Kol hamashchir hunav al divrei Torah bo'olam hazeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu mavhik zivoy le'olam haba. So mashchir is from the word shocha, is from the word darkness, and person who like blackens his face in learning. It's hard to know exactly what that means through fasting or through whatever, some kinds of physical sacrifice or whatever that is involved in learning Torah day and night. So he says that anyone that takes that approach to Torah, suffering from the Torah, so in this world, so Hashem is a midah keneged midah, he goes and rewards him that his face should be shining in olam haba, glowing. Shnema mar'ehu kalvonoin bucher ka'arozim. Omar v'tanachim ben chamilai kol hamariv atzma. Here it specifically talks about starving himself, or tanesim, whatever. Al Torah HaKadosh Baruch Hu masbiyoi lo'olam habu. So it's also the idea of he's causing himself to be hungry in this world for the Torah, and he is rewarded with that Hashem satisfies him in the world to come. Shnema Yirvian Mideshin Beisechel V'Nachal Adonechas Hashkem, referring to various forms of satisfaction. So the way he explains this is that, as we've been talking about before, is the Torah is something which is intellectual, it is spiritual, it is not physical. As opposed to other mitzvahs, which specifically have actions involved with them, things that are specific to a specific time, or they're associated with particular objects or whatever it is. Torah is totally devoid of any of these other things. It can be done any time, any place. It doesn't require, it can be done verbally, it can be done whatever way is necessary. It's not tied to a specific physical thing. So it's a totally spiritual occupation, and also it's something that takes place in the mind. It's basically Torah is something that takes place in thought. So it's not, again, associated with specific physical action. This is Dover he dveikis hagumer the Torah b'sila kagashmi. This is mamash dveikis. It's a kind of a clinging, a unification of the neshama and the seichel with the Torah, with Hashem, and it's getting rid of the gashmis. Even though most of the Torah, at least the Torah of Nigla, that is regarding studying mitzvahs in this world, that is dealing with physical objects very often. What are the halachas of how, level of halacha anyway, what are the halachas of how we should deal with the world? But the kinds of abilities and the activity itself is something which involves the mind as opposed to the body. So So he's talking about Olam Habu, whether that's talking about the Olam Neshamas in Gan Eden, or it's talking about Olam Habu after Chris Mason. In either case, he's saying that is a world that is basically transcends Gashmis. It's not a physical world, really. So therefore, it doesn't have that connection with the physical. So therefore, it's appropriate that the involvement with the Torah is rewarded specifically in that kind of environment, and it's rewarded with this additional. It doesn't have the. Basically, his point here is that the physical is holding back from total involvement with the Torah. The more involved with the Torah you are, the less involved with the physical world you are. So he says that that's why the reward is to have even a greater spiritual and intellectual pleasure in the world which transcends the Gashmis. And the concept of the shuchar, the idea of the darkness, is the opposite of light, which is and it's specifically talking about a heder, that is a taking away. It's an absence. So when the Torah flourishes in the absence of a preoccupation with Gashmis. The more into Gashmis you are, the more it obstructs the ability to learn Torah. So if you divorce yourself from involvement with the physical world, the more matzliach, the more successful you're going to be in the pursuit of Torah. So he says everything is found in light, and this is contrasting light and dark. So when you're in the light, you see things, you find things, you are enlightened, so to speak. Whereas when you're in the darkness, you don't see. It's taking things away. It's an absence of reality. You can't see what's really going on. So there's this idea of the ziv, of the shining of the face in Olam Haba, is again association of Olam Haba with light and association with the physical world with darkness. So if a person it says mesim gifoy ba'olam hagashmi ke'ilihi nedar. So if a person considers his body, his physical presence in the physical world as if it's not here, then he's able to, so then it's like Zikanagazi. In other words, it's almost like this idea of Zekam Neufel, like a seesaw. One side goes up, the other side goes down. So they're kind of mutually exclusive in that way. If you, the more you're into the physical world, the less you're able to be in the spiritual world, and vice versa. So you reduce your involvement in the physical world, and it increases your involvement in the world which is not Gashmi. The other factor is this idea of shlemus, that you receive from Hashem. Whereas the more you demonstrate your commitment and your involvement and prioritizing of the Torah, so Hashem rewards you with a shlemus, with a completeness that goes beyond something that you just find on your own. And this is something that besides the idea of that's the shlemus of Olam Haba, that's the satisfaction, the satisfaction that you get in Olam Haba, that's a fullness and a completeness that you feel as if it's a world where there is no achilu shtia, there is no eating and drinking. It says tzadikim yoshvim yitzosehem b'rashehem v'nehanim miziv hashchina, like we have we talk about on the Seder night, the tzadikim sitting and basking in the light of Hashem with their crowns on, and they're just enjoying the ziv hashchina, the brightness of the shchina. So there is no quality or level or reward, I guess, from the king. Let's say there's nothing higher than. There's nothing higher to be connected with than the king himself, and he has a crown on his head. So that's the idea that Yitzhak that the tzaddikim themselves share that crown in a sense, and they're enjoying that brightness and that light from the Shekhinah itself, which they are able to then to be makabel from Hashem. So. We talked about this a lot this year about from Amud Avoda about the concept of being mikabel, schar, of what we have to do in order to be able to accept the rewards from Hashem and not be embarrassed, or also the idea of the capacity to be able to receive that reward that Hashem wants to give us. Which he wants to give us very badly, and when he can't give us because of our aveirus are diminishing our ability to be able to makabel, then it's causing pain to Hashem. But in any case, this idea, on the other hand, to talk about the ability to give schar is the ability to be makabel that schar. Whereas as long as we have distractions and we have other priorities that are taking up space in preventing our neshamas, let's say, to be able to expand, to be able to receive the maximum that they can receive and go to their highest level of perception. The real schar that Hashem wants to give us is a spiritual schar. The physical schar is just something that we have in this world, and this world is not forever either. And the kinds of rewards that were promised are not physical rewards. They may be sometimes expressed in physical terms, but they're ultimately, where the real joy, the real pleasure is in the spiritual realm and not in the physical realm. So Hashem wants to be able to give us more of that. So to the extent that we prepare ourselves to receive that by, first of all, emptying ourselves from being filled up with physical, preoccupations. So that provides capacity simply by emptying ourselves out from this. Talks about the header that we're creating that void by not taking it up with physical things. And also we're increasing our capacity to receive simply by the endeavor of learning Torah. Torah expands our minds. It expands the neshama flourishes in an environment of Torah. So the more we're thinking about these things and we're involving ourselves with these concepts and going to ever higher levels, because the nature of Torah is that you learn something, and then once you've absorbed that kind of gets put into the background, and that generates even more questions or an ability to go to a higher level than you were before, and that's increasing your capacity. So now you've got what you learned before, you retain that, at least most of it, enough of at least a shema or something, some kind of impression that you had from the previous learning, and that opens up the level to be able to understand higher things that you weren't able to understand previously. And then you absorb those things, and you get more and more, and these treasures expand, but your capability to absorb expands also, because as you get to a higher level, now you can understand things that you couldn't understand before. So now, it's a constantly expanding thing, and that's what this whole process is really talking about. Okay, so he has another one. He says talks here about this idea of the relationship of a person who's really learning Torah with the Gashmis. And that is in Perak Oisin Pasan and Erevin. It says similar to this idea of light and dark. So there's an idea of Oirev. Oirev it plays on the word Oirev, which is a crow or something. That who do you find the Sidrei Torah in those that get up early and stay up late in the Beis Medrash. The Beis Medrash as much as possible, day and night they're there as much as possible. So that's the Oirev is a play on the word for Mariv, right? So they stay up late in the Beis Medrash. Rabba Omar b'mishem mashchir punav aleim ka'oirev. So this is a reference to the idea of mashchir punav, which you blacken the face, like an oirev, which is a crow, which is black. Ruva Omar b'mishem mesim atzmoi albunav achzuri k'moi oirev. So apparently there's a attribute of the oirev of being cruel to its children. So how do you become cruel to your children? In other words, you don't give in to your children's desires for more gashmias, which would cause you to have to work more hours and to bring in more parnasa, to give more for your children. And you resist that tendency, which is part of human nature. It says to give good things for your children, and you put them off or whatever, and just so that you're able to spend more time in Beis Medrash. So that's considered to be a positive quality. Ki hudu Rav Adel bar Masna have ke uzle bei Rav amale de bisi niki ma avdi amala ike karmi ba agma ad kan. So he was talking about this particular Rav that went home, and his wife asked him, "What am I going to feed the children?" So he said, "Well, you can, there are reeds growing in the lake over there. You can go down to the lake and cut down some reeds and give that for the children to eat." This is a kind of an extreme example, but it's indicating this concept that, as he's going to explain, this idea of going against one's nature, which is to want everything good for the children, to spend that time for Torah instead. So he says, so a person is dovek b'Torah legamri achelo yipure mi'itoy. The person gets to the level where they're completely given over to the Torah and they don't separate themselves from it. In the case is because if not, you aren't really zoicha to the Torah, the way it's supposed to be. Yitzurif is ached im hasichli. So again, and this is what's hard to understand, and I think it requires a little more explanation, because it's not something again that we're accustomed to today. Today, the world has become so physical, so tangible, and all the pleasures and all the things we're used to, the comforts that we're used to in modern life. We hardly recognize that there's such a thing as dedicating oneself to Torah. And when we hear stories about the great sages, and even in modern times, those that sat in Bes Medrash day and night and didn't necessarily work for a living, which was supported by others very often, or they just live with a very bare minimum. I know from personal experience, a few of the literature gedolim, that it's not so much about the Hasidic, but literature gedolim, you see that they live very, very simply. I mean, talking about big gedolei Torah, they're like mamish minimum from the minimum. They don't have anything, nice things or whatever. Very simple. But the idea is that it becomes the person's life to the point where they and the Torah are really one. Because if you're fighting with yourself, if you have, like I say, this kind of a dual loyalty where you're partly into the world, things you enjoy, things that you want to do, things that, ambitions that you have, in terms of physical things or whatever, accomplishments or a certain level of parnasa or whatever it is that your goal is to, something in the physical world. Inevitably, that's going to take you away from Torah, because Torah is the kind of thing where it has no limits. It doesn't have, you can't say it's ever enough. You can't say that it's that you've ever achieved a certain level and now you don't have to go further. On the contrary, it's always opening up new questions and new discoveries and new things that opens up whole new vistas which you didn't even necessarily know were there, or that interests you in terms of investigating those things, or to master certain areas of Torah that you did before. And it's impossible in a person's lifetime that they would be able to master, because it's not the idea, because it's sichlius, it's not physical, it doesn't have boundaries. So therefore, whatever it just generates, it's constantly generating more and more. It's always, the more you have, the more you want, that kind of thing. Or the more that opens up to you, that's possible. So there's no idea of ever fulfilling it and getting to a certain level and saying, okay, that's it now. I made it. Now I'm done. So that's the thing about it. So a person who is truly, into Torah, really, really, dedicated to the Torah, and is not looking at some kind of position he's going to achieve, or that he's going to, become Rosh Yeshiva, or he's going to gadol the Torah, or something people are going to look up to him. There's nothing like that. No, it's Torah lishma. In other words, this is for the Torah's sake and not for the sake of some kind of other motivations. So he has to be. He's being misached with the sichli. He's becoming unified with the seichel itself. That's becomes one unity. It's not a conflict. So that actually leads to the other quality, which is hasmada. We're talking about hasmada b'Torah, that a person just spends all his available time learning, because that just fills in all the gaps. Whenever it's possible to learn, he learns, because again, there's no resistance to that, and there's on the contrary, it's something that again draws in the person to want to do it all the more. So that's when he's going to be, feel like he's had enough. So we talk about kavias itin l'Torah, the concept of dedicating certain hours to learning. So that is for a person who has to fit it into their day, as in their schedule, as being something that at least they make sure that every day they devote a certain amount of time. So the discipline is to be koveya itin, to say, from 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, that's my time for learning. So they devoted a certain time, but that time is really just a minimum. So if they're dedicated to learning, really on a regular basis, so that's the minimum. And then any other time that's available, they'll put in. But what he's talking about here is not that. Asmada means unless you absolutely have to do something else, you're going to be learning. And we had talked about, I think the last time, about this idea of if a mitzvah can be done by somebody else, you let the other person do it, and you learn. If nobody else can do it, then you have to do it. So it's a mitzvah for you to do, specifically for you to do. You have to do it, but then you can't learn. But otherwise, you should be learning. So that's the concept here. So he says. So he said, because the nature again of the Torah itself is that it's not limited by zman. It's not. It has no boundaries in terms of a certain amount of time that you devote to it. So if you're looking at it that way, with this limitation of time, basically you are not koine the Torah itself, because that's not really what the Torah is in its essence. The Torah is broader than that. So he says, there's a seichel she'eno tachlis man she'itmili lo zman. Okay, so before with that one, the Ruva heder. He says she'iten atzmoi el heder al divrei Torah. He's prepared to sacrifice or prepared to give up things for the sake of the Torah. It says the mashke punav Torah. He's the Torah. He is, and again the mashke, the idea of the darkness, that it's the absence of light. So it's an absence of anything else that would take him away from the Torah. And also this idea, if he doesn't de-emphasize his body, bodily needs, then he's also not going to get there, because again, the seichel and the body are in a sense opposites, and the goof, the body is moinea the seichel. It's something that is preventing the seichel from going where it wants to go, because the goof is saying, but you need to take care of me. I have needs also. Don't you can't spend all your time doing this. Mm-hmm. So that's the hisnagdus, the opposition is coming from the goof. So the more the person trains himself not to listen to the goof so much and to be totally into the seichel, so then he's going to be more matzliach in the Torah itself. And then this idea of being cruel to the children. So he says this idea that his not the nefesh is already, which is like the chias, almost the animal aspect of the person, is by nature dedicated to the family, to the children, to the wife and the children, to give them everything, to be doing everything really for their sake. So the fact that he's able to be doiche adash udam mipnei Torah. She's seichel nivdul legami. So again, the seichel nivdul is the idea that it's something that's not connected to anything else. The seichel is something that's separate. It's not bound to anything. So if a person is bound to their children more than they are to the seichel, then that's also something that's a competition. Something that's taking precedence. It's becoming the priority. So the idea is to balance things, obviously, and today especially, I wouldn't suggest that people do this, although there are people that do it. And if the wife is really taken on herself that she's going to be supporting the family basically in order that he should be able to learn as much as possible, then it can work out. So the idea is that, and the children also see that example of somebody who takes Torah so seriously. So, and if he's successful in it, and he shows the value of what kind of person you become when you're that dedicated, then they're going to be, it's going to set an example for them as well. So that's the real example that's been set. So the point is that it's the fact that the person is so strongly committed to the Torah that it takes a precedence over his nature of the teva. Then that shows how important it is. So it comes out there's these three things that there is emphasizing: the mashkin maruv, the idea of spending the time. That's a complete dvekus, a complete dedication, and then noisen gifoy al heder, being able to sacrifice and not look at the body. The body needs so much, and then it becomes sichli. The person himself becomes totally seichel and ruchnius. And the idea of being axori on the children is that this idea of being mevatel the natural tendencies and the natural nature of the person in order to dedicate that to Torah. Okay.
That's it for today.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody for the attention. This is another Shlomo today. So I hope to close it today, and we hope to see you B'ezrat Hashem next Sunday through the normal schedules again. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
What happened to Shlomo?
He was not well today.
Not well.
He was